welcome to Taking the Scenic Route, Scenic Regional Library's new podcast. I'm Steve Campbell, the library's director, and I'm very excited about our very first episode ever. We hope this podcast will provide listeners with a closer look at the library, including interviews with upcoming program presenters, information about new and existing services, interviews with authors, book recommendations from our staff, and much, much more. My first guest is Walter Connor. He will be presenting a program called Making Maple Syrup on Saturday, January 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. It's a Union Branch program, but will actually be held at Walter's farm in Londell. Welcome, Walter. Thanks for joining me today. I'd like to get started by just having you talk a little bit about your background. Is maple syrup a business for you?
Oh, no. I'm a beekeeper by trade. I own Little Indian apiaries, and it's a family business. My boy in Sullivan has Tomahawk apiaries, and my boy in Jeff City has Arrowhead apiaries. But this time of the year, there's not much for a beekeeper to do, so we do maple syrup.
How did you go from being a beekeeper to getting interested in maple syrup? How did you get involved with that?
Well, I was fortunate enough at one time to have a neighbor that is considered the godfather of maple syrup in Missouri.
Oh.
Al Morocco lived right down the road from me, and I traded Al honey for maple syrup. Life was easy. And then Al decided to retire and move down the other side of Springfield. And I was there one night when he told me, and I'm like, you can't do that, Al, because I won't be able to get maple syrup. And Al was like, well, I'm going to have to teach you how real quick. But I could teach anybody the basics for making maple syrup in 2 hours. It's literally that easy. If you can boil water, there's only two things you need to know: how to finish it and how to identify trees.
So do you use one of those apps to identify trees? I've seen people use those before to identify different types of vegetation.
I haven't seen an app that works at all.
Really?
I've had several people bring apps to the woods with me, and this time of the year, maple trees tend not to have leaves, so you're trying to identify the tree by the bark and different features of the maple tree. And the app generally identifies most hard maples as white oaks.
Oh, wow.
And I've seen that over multiple apps. They just don't really work. There's a lot of information on the internet you can get that works better if you just learn, a few basic things about, how to identify a maple tree.
Will that be one of the things you'll be covering at the program too, identifying them with trees?
Oh, absolutely. That's why we're having the class at my house, where I can take people to the woods and, show them exactly what it is I'm talking about.
Sure. So what kind of equipment do you need to get maple syrup? I've seen on TV them having these cans that hook to the trees or something but what do you need at your farm for the whole process?
I'm too cheap to spend a lot of money. So I save gallon milk jugs all year long.
Oh.
I have other people save them for me. I do buy commercially made spile, which is which you put into the tree after you drill a hole. When you tap the tree, you put a spile in the hole. I cut a small hole in the side of the milk jug and hang it on the spile. And at the end of the season, you can take the milk jugs to the recycling bin. It repurposes something that was trash anyway and provides you a food safe grade material to catch it in. The whole idea of doing maple syrup is not to spend a ton of money.
Sure.
I'm trying to, if you're going to go buy it, which you're paying, $20 for 8 ounces of it, good maple syrup these days. But still, if you're going to spend a bunch of money, why not just go buy it?
So what are the key months, the best months to collect syrup from those trees?
There's actually no date on the calendar. Weather drives maple sap production. In the wintertime, when the tree freezes, it expands, which pulls sap up out of the roots into the tree because the tree is getting bigger and it creates a vacuum. And then during the day, if it gets above freezing, when the tree thaws, it forces the sap back down into the roots, which creates pressure, and that pressure is what makes the sap run during the day. I know a guy that tapped some trees in December. I tapped some the 1st of January. We're right in the middle of a big freeze right now. As soon as it warms back up, we should have a major flow.
Wow.
The sap will run for days.
So how long does it take to fill? So if the weather's getting warm up, like it's going to get warmed up here soon. How long does it take to fill up one of those gallon containers you get?
Half a day on a good flow.
Wow, really?
On a good flow, if we get the right kind of weather at the end of this hard freeze, on a tree that's 10, 12 inches in diameter, I'll have to collect sap twice a day because the jugs will overflow.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it can create. There's a lot. The trees have been freezing for over a week now, and they've been expanding. The whole time. And if you're looking at a 10, 12-inch tree, it ain't just the body of the tree. The whole tree, every limb, all that's freezing and expanding. It's pulling a lot of sap up out of the ground.
And I assume, I think I know the answer to this because it's been being done for hundreds of years, but I guess it doesn't harm the tree in any way pulling that syrup out all the time, does it?
No. And that's if you're harvesting sap, when you're drilling your holes to tap it, and you only put one tap in a 10-inch tree. A 20-inch tree, you can put two. Bigger trees than that, you can put three. But you're going to create a scar in the sapwood. So the next year when you come to tap it again, you move over 4 or 5 inches, and you move up or down a foot or two. And so these tap scars don't line up and keep the tree from being able to feed itself. As the tree grows, the sapwood will grow over them scars, and in a few years you won't be able to find them because the sapwood has grown over the top of it.
Sure.
So there's a few tricks to it, that but there's literally a lot of it's just common sense, and information about it's really easy to find on the internet.
So once you get done collecting that syrup, are you done? Like what is that it? Or the sap? What's the next step, or is there another step?
Well, you've got to boil off the excess water.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of people start out with a smaller pot, but you got to remember you're going to be boiling 40 to 45 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup.
Oh, wow.
And you can boil off about 1 gallon of liquid per hour for every square foot of the pan you're using. So you're best off to get you one of these stainless steel pans that they use in catering companies and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it gives you more surface area. And you can use propane. I use wood. Propane's too expensive. I have a wood-fired stove that I built my first stove out of an old barrel, and I think I had maybe $100 in it. I've gone to a bigger stove with a bigger pan recently. My pan right now is 2 foot by 4 foot, so it's 8 square feet, and with a blower on the front of it, it'll boil off 9 to 10 gallons an hour.
Oh, wow. So you can do this pretty quickly then, the 25 gallons down to a gallon.
Yeah. Starting out, though, you do a little bit. You learn how to do it. The only thing you really need to know after you're boiling the water, just keep your boil rolling. Don't add a bunch of cold sap at one time. If you've got a way to preheat your sap is great. The shallower you keep the sap level in the pan, the better it boils because it don't take as much energy to maintain your boil. But when you get it cooked down, and water boils at 212, and so does sap. Give or take a little bit for barometric pressure and elevation. So when you get ready to finish your syrup, and I finish my syrup in the kitchen on the stove. Once the syrup in the pan starts getting up to about 213, 214, I shut the boil down, take it all inside. At 7 degrees above the boiling temperature the day you're doing it, it will be about 66 to 68 Brix, which is syrup. So a thermometer is all you really have to have. And you'll be sitting there boiling along going, geez, this is crazy. The temperature's not going up. And you're checking it from time to time. I use a digital thermometer I bought at, I think, Ace Hardware or someplace. But then all of a sudden your temperature will jump up to 214, 215, and it starts climbing. And when it hits, like I said, 7 degrees above whatever the boiling temperature was that day, and I check my boiling temperature because I scald my jars with boiling water that I'm going to put the syrup in. So I just set a pan of water on the stove. When it starts boiling, I see what the temperature is, and that's how I know what the temperature is that day.
So what's the difference, would you say, between homemade syrup that you're making yourself on your farm there and what people buy in the store? Is it thicker? Is it sweeter? Like, what's the difference?
Homemade maple syrup, real maple syrup, is thin and runny, almost as thin as water.
Wow.
If you buy real maple syrup at the store and it's thick, it's been cut with corn syrup.
Sure. Is it sweeter?
No doubt about it. Nah, I don't think so. One of the things about homemade maple syrup is the caramelization you get while boiling it adds to that maple flavor.
Okay.
If you do a boil the first couple of weeks of January, before there's these microbes that feed on the sugar and the sap, before their numbers start increasing, you'll get a light colored maple syrup that almost looks like beer. And it has a vanilla taste to it. It is amazing. I don't give that away. My wife would probably dot my I if I gave some of that away, because that's what my grandkids and her like.
So when
you
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was saying, when you make all the maple syrup, do you sell it, or do you just give it away, or or use it for yourself?
It's usually just for friends and family. Maple syrup is not how I make my living. Beekeeping is how I pay the bills.
Sure. I just didn't know whether you sold some on the side, like a side business during the summer or winter, I mean.
No, I just make enough to, I give a lot of away for gifts, friends and family, and grandkids, and
good Christmas presents.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't like to get something sweet for Christmas?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So you're going to cover all this from identifying the trees all the way through the boiling process at the program on January 25th.
And the finishing process.
They'll
Yes,
actually.
I will have sap that's ready to finish it, and then give everybody a little bit so they can take it home and have a pancake.
Sounds very interesting. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. How far is your farm from Union for people who are going to be coming out to the program?
25 minutes.
Okay.
It's 25 minutes depending on how bad the traffic is at the intersections.
Well, Walter, thank you again for joining me. Once again, Making Maple Syrup will be on Saturday, January 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. at Walter's Farm in Lonedale. People who registered will be getting a call from our adult programmer, Melissa, at the Union branch, and she'll be giving directions to the farm so you can meet out there. If you're interested in attending this program, please visit our website at scenicregional.org and register today. Thanks a lot, Walter. Appreciate it.
Dave, I appreciate you talking with me.
We're going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about an important library service. I'm joined by the library's beloved Associate Director of Youth and Outreach Services, Christy Schenk. It's a very long title, Christy Schenk.
Yes, it is.
And she is here to talk about the library's 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program. Welcome, Christy, to our new podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here on the inaugural episode.
Okay, let's get started and have you talk a little bit about what Thousand Books Before Kindergarten is all about.
Okay, Thousand Books Before Kindergarten is something we started in March of 2020. It encourages parents with children from 0 to 5 to read to their children at least 1,000 books before they reach kindergarten. Something that we think is very important because of the importance of children being read to. And so this program gives some incentive. It gives, to make that a habit, to read to your children every day, get into that habit so that by the time they reach kindergarten, they are set up for success.
And we didn't come up with this ourselves. Talk about a little bit about where we got this idea from.
Okay, there is an organization a foundation, you would say, Thousand Books Before Kindergarten Foundation, that encourages libraries all over the country to do Thousand Books Before Kindergarten programs. They have all kinds of resources and information available there. And then they allow libraries to use those resources to start Thousand Books Before Kindergarten programs.
Like what kind of, oh, they gave us like the logo and things like that, right?
They also have reading logs, things like that. We developed all of our own reading logs and incentives and everything, but they do offer those kinds of things. You could even go straight to Thousand Books Before Kindergarten website and sign up as an individual, but they strongly encourage organizations like libraries, preschools, things like that to sponsor the programs as well.
Why 1,000 books? Like, where did they get that from? You have any idea? Or 500 books versus 2,000 books? Where do you think they got that idea from?
Well, the idea comes from the amount of reading that a child really needs before they reach kindergarten to be
Ah,
really ready to learn how to read. It's a lot of things. It's time, how much time per day you spend reading. It's about words, how many words a child is exposed to, vocabulary that they're exposed to before they reach kindergarten is really important. So that's the 1,000 books is just a a number they came up with that is going to meet those specific
standards.
needs and
Hmm.
standards. Yes.
So, how do parents enroll in the program?
It's really easy. It's on our website. You can go to the kids page on our website and go to the 1,000 books page and easily find a link to the registration form. It's in our program called Beanstack. That is our online reading program software. So
Hmm.
they can go there and sign up all on their own, make a Beanstack account, which is completely free. Once they make a Beanstack account, they have access to all of the reading programs that are currently going on for the age of the child that they register. So if they registered a preschooler, they could sign up for 1,000 books. And right now they could also sign up for winter reading program. In June, they could sign up that child up for summer reading
I
program,
was going to
anything
say
that we're
this
doing.
is it the same software we use for summer reading program and
Hmm.
winter reading program and everything else. So, if someone's
Yes.
used it for that, then they're very familiar with it already.
Right. If they're already using it, they just go in, establish an account for that child. And then because they've entered that child's age, if they enter an account for a child from 0 to 5, it'll automatically pop up saying, "Hey, would you like to sign up for 1,000 books?" Then they just click that. They're registered. They can do it all online if they would like. Every time they read, go in and log books. It'll keep track. It'll tell them when they're eligible for prizes. We have stickers that they can pick up from the library to put in their reading log when they reach 100, 200, 300, etc. And then when they get to that 1,000, right now the prize at 1,000 is a book bag, color your own book bag that the child can color to bring their library books hopefully home with. But they could also stop by the library and pick up an actual reading log if they want a paper log to put the stickers in and write down
Mhm.
the titles or check off that they've read however many titles. You do not have to write down 1,000 titles. It's just, marking how many books you've read. So if they want to do that on paper, they can also come in and pick up a reading log.
Okay, let's get into the fine print. If someone reads the same book twice, can they use it toward their 1,000 books?
Absolutely. That is so good for a child's development, that repetition. So we would never want to say, oh, they have to be 1,000 unique titles, because reading the same title to a child over and over is wonderful for their brain development, reading development, all those things. So yes, they have a favorite book, read it over and over again and count it every time.
So let's play the devil's advocate here. What do you say to someone, a parent who says, 1,000 books just sounds so overwhelming. How can I possibly read my child 1,000 books before kindergarten? It's just, or if they
Okay.
just find out about the program and their kid's already like 3 years old, and they're like, oh, I only have 2 years now before
Right.
kindergarten. How can I possibly read 1,000 books to my
So,
child?
so I did a little math. If you started at birth, which is ideal, you should be reading to your baby from the day they're born. 5 years would be 1,825 days. So if I read one book per day and probably even skipped the weekends if I want to, I would easily exceed the 1,000 books before kindergarten. But let's say I didn't. I didn't know about the program until my child was 4. In 1 year, if you waited till your child was 4, between 4 and 5, you would only need to read between 2 to 3 books a day to get to the 1,000. So it's not at all difficult to do in 1 year. Because think about a picture book.
Yeah,
When
or
you're
a
reading
board
picture,
book.
yeah, or a board book, how often do you sit down and just read one? I know when I sat and read to my kids, we'd have to say, okay, 3, 4, 5. We'd have to agree to a number before we started,
Pick,
or else.
pick,
So, but even as your child gets older, between that 4 and 5 year, you're probably reading a bit longer
sure,
picture books. So maybe you're just reading one book in the evening, but still, that's 10 or 15 minutes. And that's
sure.
what's recommended. The recommendation from I wrote this down somewhere, National Health Organization,
Mhm.
is that you read 15 to 20 minutes a day. That is the ideal amount of reading to make sure. And that's even after your kids start school. They need to continue to read 15 to 20 minutes at least a day in order to maintain their reading level.
I
So,
totally agree with you, though. You can get
yeah,
through I mean, you can get through with my kids. You could get through a board book in five
five,
five
4, 3
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and you're right. They wanted to read. They would get a stack from the library, and they wanted to read
Mhm.
4 or 5 books a night. And at that pace, you can get through 1,000 books in a couple of years at the most.
At the most, like I said, if you read 2 to 3 books a night, that or a day, that is 1 year. You can do 1,000 books.
Hmm. Well, okay, we're playing devil's advocate here. I am at least.
Hmm. Hmm.
So people who say, "Well, why do I need to go to the library and enroll in this program? Why can't I just read these books to my kids at home, or library books or books I buy? Why should I sign up for 1,000 books before kindergarten versus just doing it ourselves?"
First of all, if you're just doing it yourself, that is so amazing. But studies show
Christy,
that
Christy, we're trying to convince them to
I
join
know,
a
I know, but
thousand
studies
books.
studies show that only 52% of children are read to regularly before they enter kindergarten. And that is not enough.
No.
We want all kids to be read to before they reach kindergarten, because that is the absolute number one indicator of success in school,
Yeah.
is that you've been read to so that you're ready to learn how to read. Because if those kids who get to kindergarten and haven't been read to regularly, if they've been read less than 15 to 20 minutes a day, those children are 3 to 4 times more likely to end up dropping out of school, because they are getting to kindergarten
Wow.
already at a disadvantage. They're taking longer to learn how to read. They're probably not enjoying it. It's more difficult, it's more challenging, so they're less likely to develop that love of reading.
Hmm.
And so as they progress through school, they get further and further behind. And like I said, they are 3 to 4 times more likely to drop out of school. So it is just so important that you do. And what we think with 1,000 books is that it gives you that framework, that incentive to read every day. Yeah, we hope every person reads to their child every day, whether they're doing a program or not. But by signing up for this program, I know my grandson was doing 1,000 books before kindergarten, before he's 6 now, but they did it all through his
Hmm.
pre-K years. And it was exciting for him to mark those off. They would read books and then get out the form, and she would let him, as he got older, mark the books off. mark off that he'd read so many books. Oh, we read 3. I get to do 3 check marks in my reading log. And that was something exciting for him.
I
And then,
think that's a good point. I think that having that structure is really helpful for, especially even for parents, not just the kids. The structure
right,
structure is always helpful. Keep people on track with trying to complete goals.
right, keep people on track and also develop habits. It's
Hmm.
just really important to develop that habit of every day, whether it's nap time, whether it's bedtime is a great time. You find that time that your child just expects. We're going to read right now. And they start reminding you, okay, what books are we reading tonight? And get excited about it.
So
So it
what
just establishes that habit.
so what happens when a kid, when a parent and a child finishes the 1,000 books? You mentioned the book bag, but
Mhm, mhm. Oh, there's more exciting stuff.
there's
Oh my
more.
goodness. Yeah. Hopefully, when you come in to pick up your book bag, we try to catch everyone who comes in at that time when they pick that up and get some pictures of your child with their excited face holding their book bag up that they just received. And we put that in our newsletter and
They're library famous then.
they are library famous.
They're a
We try to make a
celebrity.
really big deal about it. Yeah, put it in the newsletter and often on Facebook, showing this child has reached this monumentous goal.
Then, if the parents are on Facebook, they can easily share it to all their friends and show them that their child is a library celebrity and has completed 1,000 books before kindergarten.
That's right. And we're always sensitive to if you don't want your child on Facebook, we will not post. We will always
Sure.
ask. And we also never include names. If you decide to share it with your friends and family with your child's name, that's up to you. But we do not put the child's name in our Facebook post because I know a lot of parents are careful about that with their kids.
As they should be.
Mhm.
Well, any parting information you'd like to add about 1,000 books before kindergarten,
I
besides how awesome it is and
How
important it is?
awesome and important, right? This one was one I just found really interesting. This statistic: children who read 3,000 words a day.
Hmm.
So that's going to be a picture book is going to have much less than 3,000 words a day. But as they get older, start reading more words per day, 3,000 words per day, they will be in the top 2% on standardized tests.
Wow.
But children who read 20 words per day will be in the bottom 2%. It makes such a huge difference in your child's success, not
Development,
just
yeah.
success in school, but then later in life, because we know that those kids who drop out or are unsuccessful in school and don't develop those good reading habits and joy in reading, they are much less likely to have high paying jobs and will have more difficulty across the board in life. So it just sets you up for being successful. And the best way to do that is reading, and the best way to have them ready to read, ready to learn. I'm not saying that you are a teacher who is teaching your child to read. You're just preparing your child to be ready to read, to be ready to learn how to read by the time they get to kindergarten.
Hmm.
And the number one way you can do that is by reading to your child every single day. And even further on, as this hopefully establishes this good habit that continues with reading time at home, whether you're reading out loud or their own, just sitting and reading to themselves, reading time. But that reading time habit is really important to establish and then continue throughout their school years.
Final question. Can someone double dip? You mentioned being able to read the same book over and over, but what if they're on this in the summer reading program or winter reading program and they're reading books? Can they count those toward 1,000 books as well?
100%. We purposely make our preschool summer reading program based on number of books. All other ages we do by minutes. We do preschool summer reading by number of books so that it matches the 1,000 books. So you don't even have to think about it. When you log a book that you read, whether you log it in 1,000 books or log it in summer reading program, it logs it in both places. Mhm.
Well, Christy, thanks for coming on and talking about 1,000 books before kindergarten. We both know it's a very important program, and we hope that people will enroll their children as soon as they listen to this.
That's right. Get out there and get those books. It doesn't cost a thing to read to your child because library card is free. Checking out books from the library is free. So there is no reason not to have those books in your home because reading to your child and your child having access to books are the number one indicators for reading success.
Thanks so much, Christy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
My next guest is John Hensley, and John will be presenting a program called 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History, Volume 2, at our Pacific branch on Saturday, January 25th at 11 a.m. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here.
I'd like to begin by having you talk a little bit about your background related to plants and gardening and that field.
Sure. I became a master gardener in 2008, and I like to get up in front of people. I know that's a little unusual,
Yes.
and speak. And so one of the things I knew I wanted to do was to explore uh, becoming a member of the Speakers Bureau.
And
I
this
did. I
and,
joined that
and
group.
this is the Master Gardener Speakers Bureau in St. Louis.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. There's my first talk that I actually developed was they asked me, they said we have a talk about plants of the Bible,
Hmm.
and there are over 100 plants in the Bible. That what they would do is they would flash the name of a plant up on the screen and then say something interesting about it. I never saw the talk given, but I did talk to one person who saw it, and they said it was just deadly boring. And so they asked me to, redo that. Well, I didn't redo it. I really created kind of a story of all of the different plants of the Bible, starting early on and developing through to the end. And the end of the talk is when Jesus goes to the cross and is crucified, and somebody dips a plant into a wine laced with gall. And so I make that statement in my talk, and I say, now, what is gall? And here is the incredible thing. I have never had that answered. I even gave that talk to a bunch of Jesuit priests, and not a one of them knew what that.
Yeah,
Well, basically,
I don't know what that is
it's
either.
heroin.
Oh, wow.
It's heroin. So he didn't do that because he knew he had to suffer for our sins and
Hmm.
and lose his life, to save us from sin.
Wow.
So
Heroin.
anyway, so that's how that got developed. And
So,
then I am a plant doctor, and I work with a partner kind of. Her name is Carol Gravens. In fact, Carol gives the first part of this talk about 50 plants that have changed the course of history. And she asked me one day, she said, "John, I have a big favor to ask of you. I have to give this talk in Illinois at night, and I'm real uncomfortable going anywhere at night, and especially, a long drive. Is there any way you could drive me?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I'd love to, because I'd like to hear the talk." And I listened to the talk, and it was fascinating. It was really fascinating. To do it justice in the time that she's allowed, she couldn't do all 50 plants. There's just no way. And we talked about that on the way back. And she said, "John, you should develop, some of the other plants in there, and talk about them," which I did. And it was really fun to put together, and interesting, I think, very
so yeah,
interesting.
they actually, that's why this is part two at the Pacific branch on the 25th, because I guess they did part one a few months ago, and now this is going to be part two of that series. And for those who don't know, this program is based on Bill Law's book called 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History. So tell us why you think that this book is so important and why plants are so important, or certain plants are so important to history.
Plants obviously are very, very important for everybody. I mean, we eat them, we serve, if without them, we wouldn't survive.
Sure.
So that's pretty fascinating right there. But they're interesting things. For instance, one of the ones that I talk about is the orange.
Hmm.
And why in the world is the orange that important? Well, when sailors first began exploring, they didn't take the right things with them. They didn't really understand about a lot of stuff. And so they had, things to eat, but they were the wrong things. And sailors developed scurvy because they weren't getting any vitamin C at all.
Yeah.
And of course they had no idea what that even was. And so they died. And many sailors would go to sea for 2 or 3 years. Half of them would die before they came back home. And the others were lucky. And then somehow or other, a man, began doing some research about this, found that, if you had vitamin C, so hey, take a bunch of oranges along, or actually it was lemons. Lemons kept better than oranges did. And just, squeeze a little bit of lemon juice in, and that seemed to cure that. And so people were able to, sail around a lot and not die.
So
Pretty
would you would
important.
you would you say that someone who might not really have a strong interest in plants or gardening, but just has a very strong interest in history might be interested in this program too? It
Oh,
sounds
of
like there's a
course.
lot of historical, I guess, very interesting historical information in it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I know we talked about this a little on the call before we began recording for our podcast today. Do you know of or have some other examples of some of the plants that you may be talking about that had an enormous impact on history? Like you mentioned, the orange.
Okay. Well, with my program, I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about is agave, and tequila is made from that plant.
Hmm.
Um, Another plant is the pineapple. Bamboo. Now, bamboo is an interesting plant. One of the things that I did when I volunteered at the Missouri Botanical Garden here is I was in charge of the patch of bamboo that they have there. Bamboo is an very invasive plant. You really don't want to have that in or near your yard because they always are sending out shoots to, develop more plants. So
That's
that's
interesting. I know in parts of the Pacific and Asia, bamboo is such a critical
it's
plant.
it,
It's so
it's
important to them.
incredibly important over there. One of the things they use it for is they use it as the structure outside of very modern commercial buildings. They don't have metal scaffolding. They use bamboo instead.
And yet it's considered an invasive plant. That's what I found interesting about that.
But it's just so strong and supple, whereas, metal structures, built outside of buildings, they're not very flexible at all. Here's
You
another interesting one. Rope, hemp rope.
Oh yeah,
Okay, and that the plant that's made from is cannabis. And that's a name you probably recognize being from Missouri. We now allow the sale of cannabis or marijuana,
sure.
which, but the hemp rope that was used by many sailors, and incredibly important thing to have on a ship, is strong rope.
So you mentioned onions, bamboo, oranges. Are there any? Oh, and pineapples. Are there any other program? Any
Right.
other?
Well, here's another one. Erythroxylum coca. Remember
Sure,
Coca-Cola?
sure.
Okay, Coca-Cola, initially that started off, the coca plant is highly addictive painkiller. And they finally took that part of it out, but it certainly there are a lot of people who who have a Coca-Cola now and then.
Because they said I've always heard the story or the rumor. I guess it's true, perhaps, that originally Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. Is
It
that
did.
it? Did,
That's
yeah.
correct. It did.
Is that what is in the coca plant? I guess I'm not a cocaine aficionado. Does the coca plant contain cocaine? Is that how they make cocaine out of the coca
I
plant?
don't, I think that's correct.
So, John, obviously you've read the book 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History in order to, create this program. Are there any plants that you believe that should have been included in the book that weren't, or ones that were in there that you thought, that might not have needed to really be in there?
Honestly, I've never really thought about that. The ones that were included in some ways are fascinating. And so, for instance, soybeans, that's a huge part of what we now use for feed. And Brazil, the United States, Argentina, all the top producers of that plant just are turning out millions and millions of acres of that plant. Sunflowers are another one of the things I talk about.
Why would you?
And those are
Why are sunflowers such a important plant in history? Would you say?
it's feed. It's used as feed now. The number one producer is Ukraine.
Oh,
And
didn't know that.
so with what's going on in Ukraine right now, perhaps that has something to do with why the number two producer, which is Russia, has such an interest in adopting them or
That is not
taking.
something I heard as a motive for that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize sunflower. They make sunflower oil. Is that correct too? They make oil out of it as well, cooking
Correct,
oil.
correct. And that's yes.
Hmm.
Well,
Well, I'm
here's
sorry.
another, we're talking about plants that are important to the course of history. The rubber tree.
Oh yeah,
Is rubber important? Well, look at the number of cars that we have driving around on the roads right now, and they're driving around on rubber tires, aren't they? Well, here's another plant that I talk about in mine, and it's barley. You
sure.
use barley to brew beer. And
Beer.
then hops,
Hmm.
so both of those are very important to, what the beer tastes like and its nutritional value. Indigo, that product was used to dye the fabric that they made blue jeans out of. So
Didn't realize
the
that.
opium poppy, there's another important plant. There are a lot of people who are addicted to that plant, and unfortunately, it's a major problem around the world.
So you would say these plants have been included in the book because they've had a an enormous impact on history for the better or the worse.
There are a lot of plants that used correctly are and for instance, the opium we talked about, used to give to people who are undergoing an operation and afterwards to reduce
Sure.
the pain. That's an incredibly effective drug for helping people, but misused,
Sure.
it ruins lives.
So, John, I was kind of wrapping things up here. You mentioned about the botanical gardens. Do you still volunteer at the botanical gardens in St. Louis?
I do. I haven't been there recently. I've had a lot of stuff going on with my home, and so it's kept me away from the botanical garden. But I will be back there because one of the things we do is we serve as kind of plant doctors. So when people come in and they have a question, with how do I get rid of this plant or how do I make this plant grow better or should I grow this plant or and my area of expertise there is lawns, which is kind of in a way it's interesting. Most gardeners and most master gardeners don't want to have anything to do with lawns.
Well, John, looks like we have to wrap things up. I really appreciate you being on our podcast. Your program, 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History, Volume 2, which will be at our Pacific branch on Saturday, January 25th at 11 a.m. And for those of you who don't know, the program will be presented at the Reap What You Sow Gardening Club that meets regularly at the Pacific Branch. It's a regular monthly group that gets together, but you don't need to be a member of the club to attend. There's, of course, no cost for any of our library's programs. Maybe you'll want to join the gardening club after the program. They usually have about 10 to 20 members attend their meetings, and the group is co-hosted by Master Gardener Jody Fleer and our Pacific Adult Programmer Ali Heisler. If you're interested in attending this program, 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History, Volume 2, please visit our website at scenicregional.org and register today. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up our first episode of Taking the Scenic Route, Scenic Regional Library's podcast. Hope you all can join me again in 2 weeks when we release our next episode.